It's the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast coming at you once again, Bengals fans. I am Anthony Cosenza, joined by one of the busiest men covering the Cincinnati Bengals this week, John Sheeran. If you've seen him on our show, and you've probably, if you're an Eagles fan, somehow tuning into this show, he's been doing the rounds there. He's been on D&H Sports. John, I know it's been a busy week for you, but how you doing, my friend?
Yeah, just put in the work, man. It's been, I guess, now 6 days since the Bengals last played. A lot of content has been produced for the site. I was fortunate enough to go on the Flippin' Birds podcast with Chris Infante and his co-host. Brian Cameron, I think is his name. So that was a lot of fun. Go check that out. I retweeted it on my Twitter account. But yeah, it's been a week. It's been a week.
That might be one of the better podcast names I think I've heard. Was it Flippin' the Bird? Flippin' Birds.
I don't think there's no D in the middle there.
It's still pretty solid. It's kind of I like it. But doing great work as always, and keeping up the website with all kinds of different stuff. It feels, John, like it's been forever since we've taken the air because the Bengals had that Thursday night game. So kind of a quick turnaround for us, and then a long gap. So yeah, we're back and talking some Cincinnati Bengals. We're going to recap a lot of different things from week 2 against the Browns. Going to kind of stick with that, a little bit of the discouraging, encouraging aspects, and break down some things with Joe Burrow, the offensive line, etc. We've got a couple of stats of the week that we're going to share, and then we're going to preview week 3 against the Eagles, a big game for the trajectory of the Cincinnati Bengals rest of the season. Even though it's an inter-conference game, a big game for that, for them. And then we'll get on out of here, but we've got a lot to get to, and hopefully you've enjoyed a lot of things that have been coming at you on this channel. Matt Minnick and Jake Liskow from Locked On Bengals did a cool little film breakdown. Matt also gave us a Chalk Talk episode doing some offensive line work. As I mentioned, John's been doing a lot of different stuff, making the rounds. So hopefully you have enjoyed the content that we've been bringing on the Cincy Jungle podcast channel, as well as on cincyjungle.com. So John, let's get to this. The Bengals lose 35-30 to the Browns. Kind of felt like it was worse than that. The Bengals were kind of playing catch up, and Burrow really kind of played with his hair on fire towards the end of the game there, making a lot of plays. Look, let's start with him. Encouraged, discouraged, and I think we know what we're gonna say here. But set a rookie record with completions with 37 through 61 total passes, which is I think up there with the second most ever for a rookie quarterback to attempt, at least in the modern era. 300 plus yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, patchwork offensive line. I think there's a lot to like there. Room for improvement, I would say, but overall, what say you?
Yeah, and he threw the ball a lot because they had to. Like, they couldn't rely on their running game. So specifically on first and second down, they just weren't getting a lot of help there. And unlike the quarterback on the other side of the field in Baker Mayfield, but 61 attempts, and they still had like a positive EPA that was pretty much like league average or slightly above average for week 2 of that week. So Burrow played about as efficiently as you could expect a rookie quarterback in his second start in 5 days, throwing the ball 60 plus times against a defense that still had talented and 2 cornerbacks that pretty much locked down his outside receivers in AJ Green and T. Higgins for the most part. So Burrow played extremely well. When I charted his decisions, like essentially the first 2 weeks now, basically he's making just one bad decision every 7 dropbacks, which for a rookie is incredibly efficient and just exemplary. I think mental processing, decision making, he's been off the charts so far in this. And in this Browns game, I think he played a lot more consistent than he did against the Chargers. Now the secondary with the Browns is a little bit weaker than the Chargers, if you want to get into matchups and nuances and all that stuff. But I think he showed improvement and growth in just a 5-day rest period. And so obviously there's a lot to like with what Burrow did. Obviously there's still points left on the board. Part of that was from the Tyler Boyd drop in the red zone. Part of that was from just missed throws and miscommunications with Higgins and Green down the field, and that's why he's only 1 of 12 of throws beyond 20 yards, which I'm sure we're going to get into tonight. But I think there's still more to like than to dislike at this point.
There is. And obviously, when you say, an error every 7 throws, that would the quote unquote error varies, whether it's, missing an open receiver, maybe not hitting a guy for a bigger play, maybe running into a sack. Zach Taylor kind of threw Joe Burrow under the bus a little bit on one of the sacks in a press conference this week, which was a little surprising. But, I understand what you're saying there. But overall, I think there are a lot of things pointing to the fact that Joe Burrow isn't playing like a stereotypical rookie. There are some facets to that, but there are others that are not. So overall, I would say encouraging. Now, where I wanted to go next, I was going to talk specifically about A.J. Green, but let's just go wide receivers encouraged or discouraged, because you got A.J. Green, 13 targets, only 3 catches. There's a lot of buts with that, right? T. Higgins getting his first couple of catches. You've got John Ross doing John Ross things. Overall, where are you at? Mike Thomas gets a touchdown, by the way. Where are you at with this wide receiver group in terms of encouraged or discouraged?
I think Boyd, who had the most yards, was the most productive. He had the easiest matchup in this game against Tavir Thomas in the slot, and he produced as expected he was going to produce. With Green, even if AJ wasn't showing obvious rust, having not played in almost 2 years now, and now playing the second game in 5 days, even if he didn't have that rust factor to him, I think it was still a very tough matchup for him. He's 32 years old going up against a 23-year-old Denzel Ward, who's one of the better athletes at the cornerback position, and honestly, just an ascending star at the position. Denzel Ward played a great game against Green, but also Terrence Mitchell for the Browns, who matched up against him equally amount. He had a tremendous game against Green, and I think that was the matchup I think a lot of us would have expected Green to produce against, and Mitchell locked him the heck down. After giving up that almost completion on the very first play of the game, Mitchell did not allow any separation against Green. And at this point, we don't know if it's more rust or if it's more age related. But I think we're going to find out a lot more about that in the next 2 weeks as he kind of continues to get acclimated back into the swing of things. But I think it's still a little bit too early to say on Green. Higgins did some good things. I liked that first catch of his career when he worked back to the sideline with Burrow scrambling. That was great communication on both of their parts. And that was something that he mentioned in his press conference, how they all as a collective group need to do a better job of working with Burrow as he's trying to create plays out of structure. There were some timing issues and there were some communication issues, I think, with him and Burrow. There was one, a little 10-yard hitch where Burrow should have got rid of the ball essentially a little bit early when Higgins was coming out of his break, ended up being an incompletion. There was a back shoulder throw to the end zone where Higgins I don't think knew that was where the ball was going to get placed, and it was an easy incompletion. So I think those are just the fact that you have two rookies trying to work together, and that's only going to come and get better with time. With Ross, though, these issues just keep popping up, and you want to keep him on the field because that's just a speed factor that you can't emulate with anyone else. But there has to be tangible production that goes with that, and that's why I think we can all sense that. Higgins is one of the starters now. He started this game against the Browns. Mike Thomas is probably overtaking Ross in the depth chart because he leads the Bengals right now in yards per route run for receivers with 1.45. He had that touchdown against Denzel Ward. He's the only receiver, I think, in this game to beat Denzel Ward in one-on-one coverage. So Thomas is improving. He's playing like the guy he was in training camp when Ross wasn't on the field. So that's kind of where things are trending in the receiving core. I think it's, again, too early to say on Green, but with Ross, there's only so many excuses you can make for the guy.
We're going to talk more about Higgins and Tate as we preview the Eagles game, because I want to talk about their potential emerging roles, especially with what happened with Auden Tate last week and the drama that kind of followed with his agent kind of having a little opening some dirty laundry, I guess, airing some dirty laundry out to the public there for Auden Tate being a healthy scratch. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. My take on A.J. Green, John, is, look, like you said, tough matchup with Denzel Ward. He did have a matchup that you think he could or should have exploited, but tough matchup against Denzel Ward. Short week, travel, not much conditioning in the preseason because he was hurt, and he's also missed a lot of games in general over the past handful of years. I give him a little bit of a pass. And look, the first two games, there were end zone opportunities that were either missed by Joe Burrow or he had an arm being grabbed by a defender late in the game that was not called for pass interference. Yeah, you'd like to think kind of an easy ball. Maybe he's able to kind of basket one hand catch that. That is asking a bit still of a pro player. But at the same time, call should have been made. Bengals maybe get a touchdown there. I think they ended up scoring a field goal instead. So that was kind of a critical point in the game. So the plays have been there. The rapport between Burrow and Green has not. And I think, just based on some circumstances with the offseason and going into Thursday night, short week, et cetera, I give it a little bit of a pass. But I think, if we're looking 4 games in, first month of the season, these issues are still occurring. I think we've got some worries there. So to me, I think overall, encouraging just because Burrow's getting a lot of guys involved. There are some issues with Tate, the lack of rapport I mentioned with Green that are a little concerning as well right now. But Boyd catches a touchdown. He also dropped one. Mike Thomas catches a touchdown. CJ Uzomah, unfortunately, I know he's not wide receiver core, but unfortunately CJ Uzomah is now out for the season with an Achilles injury. So he did catch Joe Burrow's first touchdown, the longest play by the Bengals offense on the evening. John, I'm really interested to hear what you got to say on this one. We've got about half a dozen people in our live chats just already blasting the offensive line. Now, the reason I'm really interested in what you have to say here is because I think we all know the offensive line had a lot of issues against the Browns. They were going up against Myles Garrett and all kinds of solid players on the offensive line. Let up a lot of pressures, I think close to double-digit hits on Joe Burrow. Not ideal. Bobby Hart doing Bobby Hart things. But you also put out an article on Cincy Jungle, a little bit of film review on Jonah Williams, and gave him some glowing reviews. So I guess that's where I say, John, are you encouraged overall by the offensive line or discouraged? I think I know what you're going to say. Also playing into the factor there, Fred Johnson, first start at right guard. We'll talk more about him also as we preview the Eagles.
Let's just go back to the offseason. Let's go back to the last 4 years, because ever since Whitworth and Zeidler, those guys who should not be named, since they left, they've been banking on projection. They've been banking on guys improving, taking that next step. The same thing happened in the 2020 offseason, and we're seeing the same results as we've seen for the past 4 years. Looking back in this game, Fred Johnson looked terrible, I guess, in the first watch. When going back, I don't think he was as bad as a lot of people thought he was. Now, granted, when he lost, and they were bad reps. And of course, being thrusted into the position that you haven't played since his first preseason in 2019. He didn't really practice at that position, which is what Taylor said going up to the week, because it was like a last minute decision because Billy Price was still dealing with an ankle injury. But as the game went on, I think he settled in a little bit more. He had some unfortunate opportunities to go up against Myles Garrett at defensive tackle, who kind of rang his bell a little bit. I don't think Johnson was not only the worst offensive lineman on the right side, I don't think he was the worst guard in this game. I think Michael Jordan still had more losses on his point. And like you said, Bobby Hart's the same Bobby Hart. Like, I know he didn't give up like a terrible sack in this game like he gave up against Joey Bosa and the Chargers, but the bad reps are still happening. And Myles Garrett had 9 pressures for a reason when he mostly ran off the edge of Hart's edge. So those two are just still definite liabilities. And even if Johnson isn't like a natural guard because of just his body type and the way that he plays, like there's still some hope there, because I think there's more to like about him than a guy like Hart that you believe that Johnson could still develop. It's just like I would rather see it happen at right tackle, where I think he's just more natural at. And I just don't understand how many more times we can see Bobby Hart. Like we were on the show last week and I said Hart's got to be blocking for his job. And even if he didn't play terrible, like the bad reps are still there and they can still cost this team on any given week. Even if the sacks don't come on those bad reps, like it's bad process to keep a guy out there who's just not improving, even though he's in year 5 and you keep banking on that.
I don't remember if it was you and I talking about this, or maybe it was just when I was talking to myself on the post-game show. I don't know. I don't really remember, but it seems as if, look, it's not as if Bobby Hart's bad reps aren't getting masked by minimal impact. And what I mean by that is he's not missing a run block, and instead of a play that should go for 6 yards, it's maybe 1 or 2 yards. His missed blocks and missed assignments, his losses in blocking assignments result in sacked fumbles, result in big hits on Joe Burrow and disastrous plays. And I know Matt Minnick said, hey, Hart actually had quite a few good reps in this game as well. I believe him, and I've seen the good reps at times. To me, though, John, with Hart, it's not every single rep is a disastrous play, but he has those small handful of reps that are really bad losses, and it just ends up being a chaotic play for the offense. And I think that's where the spotlight ends up shining so brightly on Bobby Hart.
Well, and that's what happens if your process is bad and your technique is bad, which is the case for Hart in both scenarios. The bad reps are catastrophe, or they end up being catastrophes, because it's just a matter of the edge rusher that given play to take advantage of it and have the opportune moment. Like, even in the plays, he doesn't give up a lot of pressures. I think Pro Football Focus recorded him with like 3 pressures this game. He had more than 3 bad reps in this game. It just wasn't a matter of having an impact on the play in general. So like the technique and the process is not improving. It's just a matter of the opposing team just not taking advantage during those specific plays. But you're right. Like the disasters are the disasters. And the problem is when you have multiple guys with that caliber on the offensive line, which is what Johnson was at times and what Jordan still is, because he hasn't taken that next step yet, it can lead to even bigger catastrophes where you have multiple guys having bad reps on the same play. It doesn't matter what Jonah Williams does at left tackle. It doesn't matter what Trey Hopkins does at center. If you have multiple guys losing on the same rep because they're just losing all throughout the game, you're going to have plays where Burrow's just scrambling out of his mind and having to do everything by himself.
2 can't mask 3, right? I mean, that's kind of the reality of it on the offensive line. And the 2 we're referencing here is Jonah Williams and Trey Hopkins, as opposed to Mike Jordan, Fred Johnson, and Bobby Hart. So I think overall we would say discouraged with the offensive line going forward. And it sounds like, at least for this week, not really many changes will be made in the lineup. Maybe that's different down the road. Let's switch to the defense, John. And again, I think I know what we're saying here, but there are some points of debate with overall defensive performance in week 1, letting up 16 points on your home field, largely containing big plays, giving your offense the chance to win in week 1. But then you've also got close to 400 yards rushing, and I believe four rushing touchdowns given up in 2 games by this defense, minimal pass rush. Then again, on the other hand, you got no Mike Daniels, no Geno Atkins, no Sean Williams. So where do you sit with encouragement or discouragement with this defensive unit?
Like, for starters, I think the Browns had a masterful game plan for this game. Like, they went out going play action heavy, regardless of what the run was doing. Like, it wasn't a matter of their run game setting up the play action. They were just going play action right out of the gate. And the Bengals were buying it because play action does work regardless of the run game. And they were having massive success with those concepts. And that's how Baker had a lot of those big plays. And then he didn't throw like a pass in the last 10 minutes of the game. He only threw 23 or 22 in total because the running game was just unstoppable. And I'm going to get to that in this week's stat of the week. But like, this defense, I mean, they did look good against Los Angeles. I'm not going to say they didn't. I think they did a lot of things well in that game, but a lot of the same issues that we saw from last year, despite the overhaul that we saw on this roster, they came back to bite them. Like, immediately, Josh Bynes, Jermaine Pratt exposed in coverage on play action or just in general man coverage, like crossing routes over the middle. They were getting exposed. They had to have Logan Wilson and King Davis-Gaither out there for some earlier snaps than they usually did. Logan Wilson got exposed. Welcome to the NFL, man. How about a run fit? How about getting off a block? He didn't do either of those things in this game. And then you go back.
He was a ghost, man.
And then you go back to the defensive line. Like, the Browns did a lot in terms of upgrading their offensive line. Jedrick Wells played outstanding for his second game of his career. Who was the right tackle in this game? Because was it Hubbard at right tackle?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah, he had I think that the best game of his Browns career, because Carlos Dunlap, Sam Hubbard, didn't matter who was rushing off that left edge for the Bengals. They weren't getting any pressure. Akeem Davis-Gaither had the most pressures on this defense. Carl Lawson, Carlos Dunlap, Sam Hubbard were doing nothing in the pass rush, regardless of play action, regardless of the run game. Even in straight true dropbacks, they were not affecting the pocket for Baker. And Baker just took advantage of that. Like, against the Ravens, Baker was having happy feet. He was sensing the rush, even though it wasn't there. And he looked like the Baker of 2019. In this game, Baker just looked completely confident. It's like he had the utmost confidence that nobody in white and orange for the Bengals was going to touch him. And they didn't touch him all game. So they had a fantastic game plan out of the gate. Baker executed perfectly. The run game was it was tremendous, but I think we all expected that Chubb and Hunt to have success because that's just how good that they are. I think it's more of a testament to their skill rather than how bad the Bengals are against the run, but it doesn't excuse how bad that they were in this game.
That might have been one of the best games I've seen Baker Mayfield play. And I don't watch 16 Browns games a year, but I do watch, quite a handful of them. At a minimum of 2 because they play the Bengals, but I do pay attention to the Browns and watch Baker Mayfield quite frequently, and that was one of the top games I've seen him. He did have the interception late in the game that was a very different looking coverage scheme that Lou Anarumo drew up, and William Jackson picked the ball off. But for the most part, I thought Baker Mayfield played largely outstanding because he was able to utilize that play action, and it was a lot of bootleg stuff where he would play action, roll out, and hit a guy or hit Odell Beckham on what looked like single coverage, man-to-man coverage on the outside. And, they made him pay. They made the Bengals pay. My feelings on the defense, John, are that, is it similar to week 1 of last year where the Bengals were, they looked pretty good on defense in week 1 against Seattle of all teams. And then the next week they get trounced by a 49ers team that, by the way, they're bouncing the ball outside. They're using the lack of lateral speed that the Bengals had in 2019, at least, against them. Seeing a lot of outside runs, runs kind of out wide in this Browns game, and it exposed the Bengals a little bit there too. So the thing I'm worried about, John, is you still got 2 games against the Ravens. They can run the ball. The Steelers have shown that they always can run the ball no matter who's in the backfield. And by the way, they just got David DeCastro back. He missed the first 2 games. That's not good news for Bengals defense. So I'm discouraged. I'd like to think, hey, maybe one of these weeks is an aberration. Hopefully it's week 2, again, short week, go on the road, that sort of thing. But they've got some tough games coming up against the run, at least, and I'm worried.
Well, I mean, the problem is a lot of those teams that you mentioned, they have really good offensive lines. The Browns have, if not the best offensive line in the entire league, probably the best offensive line in the division. Wyatt Teller, J.C. Treader, Joel Bitonio, that's an incredible interior trio. And the 2 bookends that we mentioned, that they didn't even have their starting right tackle in Jack Conklin, who's also a great run blocker. Like the Ravens, Steelers, they will road grade you. And like DJ Reader and whoever's at 3 technique for the Bengals, they just can't do it all. Like they need their linebackers to step up and take on blocks and disengage. Like they didn't have any of that against the Browns. You're just not going to have success against an offensive line that good and against schemes that the Ravens and the Steelers run. So it's going to be a problem until they get fully healthy personnel back there and just guys that live up to their capabilities. So yeah, it's a worry. And honestly, like the first 2 weeks, I'm wondering like where's Von Bell? Honestly, he's not really making a lot of differences in either against the runner or the pass. And I should do a better job of like trying to analyze what exactly he's doing, because it just doesn't seem like he's not popping off the screen like I expected him to. And I wonder what his role has been so far in this defense. But I think against the Chargers, he had a couple of missed tackles, and against the Browns, he was largely non-factor. So for a guy who had a lot of confidence was going to make an immediate difference, I guess he would be a guy that I'm a little discouraged about so far.
I'm glad that's a good segue, because I want to talk just briefly about a couple of individual players in terms of encouragement or discouragement, and that we can get that one out of the way there. I do think there may be a Sean Williams absence factor going into that, because I think Lou Anarumo kind of wanted to do some different things with those guys. Sean Williams not being available in the lineup, maybe putting Von Bell into some compromising situations, not really playing to his strengths. But yeah, like you said, I think we need to look a little closer to that. To me, Carlos Dunlap, a discouraging start to this season. I know he's a real streaky player. He's a guy who gets hot towards the middle and end of seasons, and he creates gigantic plays that usually you can readily point to that was a game-winning type of play. But he's been a ghost to start this season. I don't know if you want to say that's the Geno Atkins absence factor, maybe, but he's been disappointing. You can point to a couple of other guys on that defensive line, and really a lot of guys on that defense. One guy I want to say that I am encouraged with, or at least I became encouraged with based on some things I saw late in the game in week 2, and I want to get your thoughts on it, John, was Drew Sample, a guy who stepped up quite a bit with Uzomah getting injured, not really getting these huge chunk plays, but chain moving plays, a nice outlet, and kind of what Joe Burrow needs, especially when he's got to get the ball out quickly, when maybe the first read's not there. Drew Sample sitting in the middle of the field for a decent gain to keep a drive moving. I thought that was a nice adjustment by the coaching staff, and really Drew Sample stepping up, made an awesome one-hand catch in the game, and I thought he looked pretty good. So I'm encouraged, cautiously encouraged by what I saw from him.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to look back in the record books about the first for Joe Burrow, like the win hasn't come or anything, but the first receiver that bailed out Joe Burrow on a bad throw is Drew Sample, I think. Yep. that I don't think anyone expected that catch to happen. It was only for a handful of yards, and I don't even know if it went for first down, but it sucks to see Uzomah go down with an Achilles. I think we all knew immediately. It looked exactly like the Kevin Durant injury from a year ago, but I mean, this is the perfect opportunity for Sample. It was going to be interesting to see how those two were going to kind of get involved in the offense with both of them healthy, but with Uzomah out, I mean, this is Sample's job to lose now at this point. And now going into 2021, you have Uzomah coming back from an Achilles injury in the last year of his contract. You still have 2 more years with Sample under contract. This year is huge for Sample, and I think it's up to see if he actually made the improvements of the offseason to take on this role, because in this game, he was, again, 7 receptions, 45 yards, nothing to really blow you away, but those were impactful receptions at when they were made during the game. And for Sample, I mean, that's a career game for him. He only had like a handful of receptions in all of 2019. So kudos to him for stepping up when he was called upon, and now it's up to him keeping that going.
Any others that you individual players that you want to note as encouraged or discouraged? I got one actually before you. What about Randy Bullock? Based on what happened in week 1 and what happened here in week 2, are you encouraged that maybe that was just a fluky thing? I think we know who Randy Bullock is by now, by the way. But are you at least encouraged that it was a nice bounce back game for Randy Bullock?
Well, I mean, first of all, how about those Cavs? Looking pretty strong there.
Yeah.
I think Bullock has always been the guy I think has been pretty accurate inside 40. I think anytime you ask him to go beyond 45, it's just a question of, does he have the leg power to comfortably kick this accurately? Like when Justin Tucker goes out there, I don't know if Ravens fans are even the slightest bit worried when he's under 60, because he knows that he has the leg to kick it accurately and doesn't have to put anything extra on it. With Bullock, it's if Bullock has to kick a 6-yard field goal, I think his calf might literally explode, because he knows that he needs everything in his power to get there. So and that's why it was so shocking when he made that 58-yarder against Miami during the shit bowl of 2019. So I think this game, they weren't necessarily tough field goals. I think his longest one was still back in week 1. So good for him for being accurate, but he's always been accurate in these situations.
Yep. Any others that you want to touch on individually in terms of encouraged or discouraged that maybe we haven't talked about yet?
Yeah, I think William Jackson had that one bad rep against Odell Beckham. He bit on a double move, and I mean, Bengals fans are constantly underrating Odell Beckham, even though he's had his best games as a Brown against the Bengals. I thought Beckham was going to go up against Darius Phillips for most of this game, but he actually ended up seeing William Jackson a fair share, and Jackson bit the dust a little bit early on, and then he came back with an interception. I think a lot of people were confused at that coverage. It just looked like some type of variation of cover 3, but some of the assignments got changed off of play action bootleg. But kudos to him for finding the ball and reading Baker Mayfield and making a play. His first interception in I think 3 or 4 years now since that Green Bay game back in his rookie year. So kudos to him for making a good play. I think he was still PFF's highest coverage graded player of the game. He was only targeted a handful of times, and unfortunately that Beckham touchdown stands out. But I think he's still I think it's still him trending in the right direction despite that play.
I would agree with you. There was also the non-PI call against him that could have been, I think, a big play. But overall, I think it's been a good start to the season for William Jackson. I would agree with you there. We're going to move on with some stats of the week. Before we do, I want to remind everybody to get this show how you can. First of all, thanks for tuning in live if you're joining us live, or if not, thanks for tuning in after the fact on one of many audio streaming platforms. You know all of them by now, so we're on most of them. Get the show how you can. If you like the video format better, you can be sure to subscribe to Cincy Jungle's Facebook page. We're always streaming there. And of course, our own YouTube page. There is a subscribe little logo button right under John's left shoulder. We should have that. We should make a little shirt for you, John, just so it has that logo permanently on there because it's always hovering over you. So go ahead and subscribe there. Get our content from the Orange and Black Insider, as well as Chalk Talk from Matt Minnick, and a lot of other stuff that we're putting out there. We appreciate the support.
All right, so let's get to stat of the week. We're just going to label just like, something that caught our eye when looking at the box score, maybe some advanced stats that really tells us a story about this game or about what is to come. So Anthony, how about you start? What's your stat of the week?
Well, I was going to go super advanced with this one. We got some next gen stats sent to us from the NFL. I think I tweeted a lot of those out for those who follow me on Twitter. I was going to maybe talk about some of those more intricate ones, but I'm going to go a little bit more big picture macro look at things. And I'm just going to say the Bengals went 5 of 5 on fourth downs in this game. And this was a team that was very adverse, especially last year with the quarterback play. They were very adverse to, going for it on fourth downs, especially fourth and long. And, we kind of were like, hey, get it going. Now, obviously, as they started to lose games later in the year, it became more prevalent that they were going to be going for it on fourth when they were down by a bunch of points, that sort of thing. But I wanted to point this out. Not only is this a good indicator it's an indicator for a lot of things. Number one, I think the Bengals going forward will be a little more aggressive because of who they have under center. And maybe that's hello, Captain Obvious on that. But I think we're just going to see a team that's more prone to continuing drives on 4th and 2s, 4th and 3s, 4th and 5s, especially when the offensive line is not letting this offense get chunk run plays when Joe Burrow's taking a sack and they move back and then move back forward after a sack. So I think you're going to see this team go for it more often on fourth down than we maybe were accustomed to. And I also think that they'll be successful at doing so because of who's under center. So I thought the 5 of 5 fourth down conversions was a really interesting stat. Again, not one of those deals you got to dig too deep to look at. But to me, I just looked at that and I said that this might be a facet of the offense that we're not used to. And it may lead to more points, more yards, more excitement. And it also may be an indicator that the Bengals are falling behind quite a bit in games and falling behind early.
Yeah, and one of those fourth downs came on the first drive.
Yeah,
it was a Tyler Boyd on a great play design where they had the rub route on the outside, and they had Boyd kind of fading out to the outside and creating space there. So I love that aggression from Taylor, especially compared to last week when they could have went for fourth down in the first half, but they decided not to. My stat of the day is not so positive. It's 5.09, which is the average yards after contact that Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt ran per attempt in this game. They ran the ball 32 times between the two of them, and averaging 5 a pop after contact. Like most of the yards came after a Cincinnati Bengal touched them. Like the Bengals did a good job of rallying to them pretty quickly. And I know there were some plays where they gained a lot of movement, and the Browns' offensive line is just one of those that they can just generate movement immediately, whether they run power or counter or zone. They are scheme versatile, and they have the athletes to do whatever they want. And the Bengals did not have the linebackers or the personnel up front to really handle that. But when they got to Chubb and Hunt early, like we knew this was a thing. They needed to crowd to them early. They needed to get as many bodies there as possible. The Bengals had, I want to say, like 7 or 8 defensive players in this game that had recorded in this tackle. Jesse Bates led them with 4.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like one player aside from Bates was getting. But even then, like if your safety is the guy who's if your free safety is the guy who's like screaming up there because you have a running back who's getting loose in the second level, that's an indictment on your front 7 or your front 6, whoever your personnel is out there. So Chubb and Hunt were met pretty early, despite all the movement that was being generated by the offensive line, but they were just making so many plays on their own. They had a combined 9 avoided tackles. And on that last drive, it just looked like the Bengals defense was completely gassed. They were exhausted, and they just ran all over them in like 5 or 6 plays. They ran down the field, got a quick score. Hunt and Chubb are, I think, definitely the best 1-2 attack at running back in the entire league. And again, I think it's a little bit more about how good that they are, but it's also like how the Bengals got destroyed. It wasn't necessarily them just losing immediately, but it was just guys just not being able to gang tackle on these guys. It was unbelievable how much yards they were generating after contact, and that's one of Chubb's greatest strengths, and that's still what makes Hunt a good running back. But still, the numbers don't lie compared to what we saw with our eyes.
as frustrating as that stat is just on its face, the frustrating thing about it, John, to me, is the fact that the Bengals were pretty good at wrapping up ball carriers in week one. There weren't a ton of missed tackles. And really the big issues that arose in week one in terms of being able to guard the run was when DJ Reader went out with cramps. Once he went out with cramps, it was a different defense. The regression from week to week, granted, better running backs, like you said, in Chubb and Hunt, but the regression in this factor, and the steep regression in this factor, just from 1 week, is very, very concerning. And I want to ask you, again, what we talked about kind of in the opening segment here, how much do you play the it's Thursday night on the road card playing into this?
It's part of it, but still, like it was a definite mismatch. Like the Browns' offensive line and their running game, it's that good. And if you can have that much success and not have to lean on your quarterback, which is good in this case because you don't want to lean too much on Baker Mayfield, then just by all means do that, because there was no answer that the Bengals had in this. Like from the get-go, they looked outmatched and out schemed. And in this game, it was Chubb and Hunt doing whatever they want. It was Wyatt Teller continuing to play like arguably the best guard in the entire NFL right now. So I think the Browns showed that they still have a lot of talent, and they just needed an opponent to get their things right, and it just happened to be the Bengals in this case.
Yeah, so those are the stats of the week, 1 positive, 1 negative in terms of the Bengals, and we will continue to bring you those and break those down throughout the season. Good stuff, John, as always. We're gonna transition now into week 3. The Bengals take on the Philadelphia Eagles in Philly, in the city of brotherly love, and a big game for the Bengals. Not only because they're coming off a little extra rest with that Thursday night game, but 0-2. Zach Taylor is now 2-16 to start his NFL career, John. Not a good look. And the Bengals may still be out with may be without some of their star players on defense. So some of these things may play into it. So let's look at I'm going to share my screen here. This is on cincyjungle.com, and an article here about Geno Atkins and Mike Daniels. They, as of Wednesday, are still not practicing. So that is not a good look. Sean Williams finally comes back in a limited capacity. You can see down here the injury report as of Wednesday. Now we can look at this. You know, that you may be listening to this program Thursday or Friday, and things could change. John, I would say that if these guys, the big indicator is Thursday. Isn't that usually the practice that says, you know, if a guy is at least limited there, usually that's a sign towards a positive sign that they're going to be playing Sunday.
Yeah, that would be the safe designation. Now, I wonder if with Atkins' case, if you're okay with him practicing one day on like Friday, if he's limited, if he's practicing on Friday, I think he's for sure going to play. Just may not be in full capacity, might just be limited throughout the game. I mean, having both those guys out is obviously worse than just one, but when both are out, you can sense like the ripple effect. And unfortunately, this game, it's a lot like the Chargers, where you have matchups up front that you can exploit. The Eagles are without both of their projected week 1 starters at left and right guard. They had Brandon Brooks out before the season even began,
right?
And they had their left guard, Isaac. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce his last name. I don't know off the top of my head. He's on IR now, so they have 2 backup guards playing between maybe the best center of the game and Jason Kelsey. Go UC. So I mean, there's a chance for whoever lines up at 3 technique for the Bengals to have a day. And if Atkins was 100% healthy, I would have confidence that they can exploit that. But if it's not, it's almost like it's going from potential mismatch favoring the Bengals to just kind of even Steven.
If you listen to Bengal Jim Foster, either his own program that he does, or if you saw him when we did our week 1 pregame show, courtesy of Narragansett Beer, when he came on our program, he said Troy Blackburn did a jog by when they were setting up his drive-through tailgate experience, and said that Troy said that it's probably a very good possibility that Atkins plays in this Eagles game. Now here we sit, and Wednesday he still hasn't practiced. So we'll see here. This obviously seems to be some sort of lingering issue because he hasn't been practicing for, about 3 or 4 weeks now, John. So a little concerning. Obviously not something that's going to, put him on IR, or otherwise they probably would have done that at this point. But, a little concerning. And like you said, having at least one of those guys, Atkins or Daniels, in the interior, it makes a big difference, as we saw last week. So let's continue on a little bit in terms of the Bengals news front before we get into the analysis of the game and a little bit of stuff on the Eagles side of the fence. Fred Johnson gets to start again. Zach Taylor announced at right guard. Are you surprised about that?
No, because we don't know at this moment what Billy Price's status is, and if they can't go with either of those guys, then they're throwing Hakeem Adeniji out into the fray. And I mean, he was all over the place in training camp with how they use them. So who knows if he's even mentally prepared to play at this point. So I'm not too surprised, considering I think they saw the same things that I saw with Johnson, how he just got a little bit better as the game went on. It wasn't as bad as what it initially was, but I mean, if Fletcher Cox plays, like, that's the guy he's going up against, and he has an opportunity to get exposed once again. And if it's not, I mean, Malik Jackson is the other Eagles defensive lineman. He's mainly going up against the left guard, but if Johnson goes up against him, I think he's in the top 10 in terms of pass rush win rate according to ESPN's metrics. So that's still a tough matchup for him, even if it's not Fletcher Cox. But I think, I mean, Taylor had all the rationale out of it. Like, he barely practiced. It was his first game of the year. He didn't really practice at the position that much. So, like, I'm not too surprised, considering we don't know the status of Billy Price, or if they just don't like Billy Price enough to start him over Johnson, because Johnson is the guy that Jim Turner and Zach Taylor both brought in 2019. Billy Price, the guy from the old regime and all that stuff. So I'm not too surprised, because he didn't play necessarily as bad as the perception that it was. But this is still not exactly a game where I have a lot of confidence that he's going to do well.
So the Bengals offensive line will look very similar to what it looked like on Thursday Night Football, for better or for worse. I want to ask this, John. What do you think the Auden Tate situation is going to look like this week, now that his agent aired some dirty laundry? I can remember when I coached at the high school level, and I remember when I would have a disgruntled parent come up to me about playing time of their kid, and we had our reasons. Usually we felt we were pretty fair in terms of getting everybody a lot of playing time, but there would always be that parent. And, oftentimes we would respond with, hey, you okay? Let's see what happens there. Well, squeaky wheel gets the oil, so to speak. Do you think that this is a similar situation when the agent spoke up, and obviously Zach Taylor came rushing to Tate's defense this week saying, I love Auden Tate, we love him on this football team, that sort of thing. He was a healthy scratch. Do you see a bigger role for him in this game?
Yeah, like, when looking back, because I try to project who gets inactive or who isn't active for the game, and there was one spot where, like, I'm not sure who it's going to be. And considering that they had 7 wide receivers, it was possible that one of those guys was not going to get dressed, and it just happened to be Tate. I don't think it's like Tate getting completely phased out of the offense necessarily. I think it might just been a 1-week type of thing. But I mean, I can kind of see why, like, this kind of happened. It just, even if he was a 7th round pick, like, Tate was like the dude at Florida State, and he was like a highly touted, like, high school recruit. So and then he gains that chip on his shoulder after almost being undrafted in 2018. And I think he and his agent know that he played pretty well with a bad quarterback last year. And it is an understandable level of disrespect that he felt. And I don't think it's too terrible that he aired those concerns publicly. I mean, it wasn't Tate, it was his agent, to be clear about that. But I can see from their perspective why they felt that way. Like, if it was Alex Erickson or Mike Thomas who happened to be inactive, there's no way that we're seeing that report from their respective agents. Like, they don't have that type of personality. They don't have that, like, a history of succeeding and then being in a place where you're just not a factor at all. So I don't know if Tate's going to be active for this game. I think he might have to be if they have enough injuries where they just can't sit like a certain number of healthy players. But I don't know if it's going to be to the point where Tate gets like 10 targets just because his agent is now threatening to request a trade from them.
Something's got to give on offense in terms of someone's making big plays. Last week, the 23-yard touchdown to CJ Uzomah was the biggest play that the Bengals had. They're not getting the big run plays. They're not getting big plays in the screen pass game. Joe Burrow is not getting time often enough to get a deep ball going. And when he does, it's a miss, usually to AJ Green, but others. And Ross, the supposed big play speedster guy, has not been stepping up and making plays, whether that's Burrow, Ross, both, what have you. Something's got to give. So if they think that Tate can come in there and not only move the chains, but, you know, get a red zone touchdown on a jump ball, if they think he's not a deep threat per se, but he kind of is in a way, John, because he can outleap so many defenders. He won't outrun them, but he can outleap them with his size and catch radius. So, I mean, I think if they feel that they made a mistake last week and they need to get those big plays on offense and Tate can provide that, I think he's active and maybe get some looks.
Like right now, excuse me, if you were to ask me, like, if both Auden Tate and John Ross play the same number of snaps, and I was to be asked who gets more receiving yards on like the same number of targets, I would go with Tate, because I just have more confidence that he's going to haul in more targets than Ross. He's going to have better connection with Burrow. And I thought that there was some type of connection, at least in training camp, because he was playing for AJ Green when Green was nursing that hamstring injury. So it's not like he has just been a non-factor for the offseason and he just hasn't been clicking, and all of a sudden he's in this place. Like, I think this was just an unfortunate thing for this week where he just happened to not be in. And I know people want Tate to play over Ross for those reasons. Like, he would potentially be more productive in a similar role, but I understand why Ross is still going out there, because the coaches feel like that his speed can change how coverages are being played upon the Bengals offense and how he just changes the dynamic of what defenses have to respect. But at a certain point, I think the frustration will boil over to, if this guy's just not producing, there's only so much. There's only so many things that we can say to not put our better player out there instead of Ross. So maybe Ross plays this week against a bad secondary. Maybe Tate gets more looks if he is active, because it is a bad secondary. But, like, you know, the whole Ross speed factor can only go so far if he's not making those plays. And we have seen Tate make those plays. Despite not being a very fast receiver, he has the ability to go up there and be a vertical threat, because it's just a jump ball. And that's something that Joe Burrow was successful with LSU. And I'm having that confidence because we did kind of see it in training camp, but we just have to see it in the regular season now.
Yeah, those back shoulder throws, right? That seems to be something that you would think Tate would maybe excel at because of Burrow's excellent accuracy in that facet. Now, before we get to a few more X's and O's and maybe prediction and outlook on this game, we're going to take a quick peek over the other side of the fence with the Eagles. And really, I'm going to share an article I came across today, John, in just a second here. But really, the story with the Eagles, at least from our seats, is with Carson Wentz, 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions in 2 games, zero touchdowns and 2 interceptions last week against the Rams. Eagles starting 0-2, a little bit of a surprise, especially when they started with Washington to kick off the season, and a lot of people thought that was a gimme win, and they lose last week against the Rams, and this becomes a must-win game for Philadelphia. You could argue the same for Cincinnati for a couple of reasons, but this becomes a must-win game for the Eagles, and I'm going to share this with you. I thought it was interesting. I don't want to go super in depth with this, but I want fans to kind of know what some things are some of the things that that's going on with Carson Wentz so far this year. So this is 10 Carson Wentz stats you won't believe as the Eagles QB struggles by Reuben Frank of NBC Philadelphia. He's got a passer rating of 72.5 against Washington and 56.5 against the Rams. He's the only NFL quarterback who's had a rating below 73 in 2 starts this year. So that's not good. Wentz already has as many games with a rating below 73 in 2 games this year as he did in 40 games of last season's combined. There's a dubious stat with that 73 rating where he ties actually his coach, Doug Peterson, and Donovan McNabb with a dubious number there. Brutal after halftime. Where does that sound familiar, John? In the second half of the 2 Eagles losses, Wentz is 23 of 44 for 214 yards, no touchdowns, and 3 interceptions, 37.5 second half passer rating. fourth QB in Eagles history to have back-to-back games with 40 or more pass attempts and a passer rating under 75. The sixth QB in the last 60 years to throw 2 interceptions in each of the Eagles' first 2 games. Wentz has thrown 4 interceptions since his last touchdown. That's a biggie. And in the span of just 8 days, Wentz dropped from number 4 in NFL history in career interception ratio to number 8. So these are just some of the things here. 2 games into the season, Wentz ranks 31st of 32 QBs in passer rating, ahead of only Kirk Cousins. 29th in completion percentage, 28th in touchdown percentage, 29th in yards per attempt, and 19th in yards per game. Now, a lot can be said about the offensive line. You mentioned those 2 guards are out for the Eagles, and I think that Wentz has been feeling a lot of pressure, but there have been some bad throws, bad plays, and it's really hurt the team. And now their star receiver, their rookie wide receiver, Jalen Reagor, is out, at least for this. I think he's out for about a month or so. So he won't have him. Limited wide receiver core. I get a little worried because last week we were saying, is Baker's job on the line if he doesn't play well? And then, of course, he has this immense bounce back game. And here we are kind of saying this with Carson Wentz, but the numbers are not looking good for the Eagles signal caller.
A couple of things, Stan, some more stats for you guys. The Eagles have been allowing a 31% pressure rate per dropback, which is about a little bit better than average. I mean, their offensive line is still better than the Bengals. Like, they still have Lane Johnson, Jason Kelly out there, and Jason Pierce may not be the same Jason Pierce as he used to be, but he's still like pretty good. He's still pretty decent. On those 30% dropbacks 31% pressure rate per dropback, Wentz is converting those pressures to sacks at 27%, which is one of the worst in the league. So it's more of Wentz he's doing the least in terms of playing under pressure and just not getting the ball out, not creating big plays. He's just taking a lot of sacks that unfortunately he shouldn't be. And the passer rating stats are damning for him, and it reflects a lot in this PFF grade, which is like 44 right now. And the first 4 years in the league, he averaged 3.9% turnover-worthy play percentage and about a 56% accurate pass percentage. Those numbers are up to 9.2% turnover-worthy play percentage. His accurate pass percentage is down to 40%. So it's ugly. There's no way around. And now we have a 2-game sample size of it against 2 completely different defenses in the Washington football team and the Los Angeles Rams. So Wentz is not playing good. Like you said, they only have 4 healthy receivers this game. One of them happens to be Deshaun Jackson, who I still think can have a good game. I still think is a good player, but like, this is not these don't look like fluky numbers right now. It looks like a quarterback who's actually struggling and has a decent offensive line, but just not doing anything behind it. And he's just not being accurate on any level of the field. So that is the one thing that the Bengals have that they can exploit. They have the better quarterback in this game, and they can put up more points, and they have the better situation on offense. Like, they have a definite problem in terms of matching up with that Eagles defensive line. And the Eagles' offensive line is better than the Bengals' defensive line at this moment, even if they have those 2 injuries. But if they can't move the ball again with Carson Wentz as their quarterback, like, there's no logical reason why the Bengals shouldn't be competitive to the point where they can win this game.
So let's talk about that. A lot of people feel that the Eagles, a couple years removed from a Super Bowl victory and a number 2 overall pick at quarterback from a couple of years ago, they feel that this could be and should be a competitive team, and they have not been. They're 0-2. So this, for that team, you would think, is a very important game to get their season back on track. John, we know statistically, I think since 2003 it was, that basically 11 or 12% of teams that have started 0-2 end up making the postseason. So it's not a good outlook for either one of these teams, regardless of what happens this week. So we know that this, because of expectations for the Eagles, matters quite a bit. The expectations seem to be quite a bit lower for the Cincinnati Bengals. But, John, I've been noticing over the past week plus, since the Bengals lost to the Browns, team should be 1-1, maybe even 2-0, depending on who you ask, at least 1-1. You now have Zach Taylor 2-16. I think there's 10 games, 10 one-possession or one-score games where the Bengals have not pulled it out in the Zach Taylor era. People are getting a little uneasy. So what is this game in your eyes? What does this mean for the Bengals going forward in this year and for Zach Taylor? And for their, their outlook for the rest of the season, if they are to make an unlikely playoff push, obviously they need this game, but what are your kind of overall impressions if the Bengals, if they win this game or if they drop this game?
Well, 0-2 is 0-2 and 0-3 is 0-3. So both teams, I think, should have the same urgency. It's not like one matters more than the other. I'm not saying that you were prefacing that or saying that, but I'm saying, like, in terms of expectations, I guess, like, the Eagles have the worst DVOA rating for Football Outsiders for a team projected to have a positive DVOA in the preseason. Like, they are playing so far below expectation that it's not even funny. The Bengals are still a last place team until they aren't. And last Thursday was a chance to prove that they may not be ready to compete for the division, but they're at least going to be better than the Browns. Like, they're not there yet. They're not the Browns. They don't have the talent to match up with them. That was so obvious and apparent. Now they have a better quarterback than they used to have in the past 10 years, but they're not ready yet to compete against the team even as the Browns. So they're in a very tough division. They're still projected to go last place, which is what they were projected to before the season. The Eagles, on the other hand, they're in the worst division in football, and they still have a chance to win the division even if they're 0-2. So both teams are looking to avoid 0-3. One team's at home. One team is a 6.5-point favorite. And there's a reason why because the Bengals are the other team, and they played almost equally as bad in week 2 as the Eagles have in their first 2 weeks. So if the Bengals go 0-3, you're not going to see Zach Taylor fired. You're not going to see any of his assistants fired. I think if anyone was going to get fired, it would have happened after week 2, which is kind of what happened with Ken Zampese in 2017. So, I mean, no heads are going to roll after this game. And it's not like 0-2 and 0-3 are that big of a difference in terms of making the playoffs. Like, if you're 0-2, you're already mathematically eliminated based off of just if you simulate 1,000 seasons, you're not making the playoffs that much. So if you're 0-3, you're basically virtually like you're donezo, but it's not like it's that big of a difference. So the Eagles is the team that they should probably win based on how they're playing right now. But it's not like 0-3 is that big of a shock compared to how the Bengals were expected to be this year, which is like a 6 or 7 win team at best. And they can still feasibly achieve that because I think the second half is going to be a little bit easier for them based off of how everything is going around the league. But I mean, 0-3 is bad, and it reflects poorly on Zach Taylor, who only has 2 wins in his career. But it's not like anyone is going to get fired or anything drastically is going to change because that time for change was in the offseason when they had the chance to upgrade the offensive line and fix some other dire positions, and they decided not to do that.
Yeah, I'm not calling for Zach Taylor's head by any means, and I'm not thinking that if they go 0-3, he's gone after this game. That's not really what I'm saying. But, I mean, at some point, the optimism and the excitement runs dry when you've got this new young head coach. He's assembled his, quote-unquote, his staff, and you've got this franchise quarterback. You've had kind of an exciting draft, an exciting offseason. You were coming off a 2-14 franchise worst tied for season. And then now if you start the season 0-3, I think you're going to get some uneasy people, especially because so many of us, even if we realistically did expect a 6, 7, maybe 8-win season, when you start 0-3, you're going to get some people that are a little unhappy. And, whatever that leads to, I don't know, but there's going to be some questions about the viability of Zach Taylor as head coach. The questions won't exist for Joe Burrow. We know that. And I think what he showed us last week definitely proves that he has, quote unquote, it. But I just think this is a big game for Zach Taylor, whether or not they end up making the playoffs or doing whatever at the end of this year. I just think that winning a game early in the season, which they were not able to achieve last year, it's just a big deal.
Yeah. And we talked a lot about, close game regression from season to season. They're not only 0-10 in Zach Taylor's first 10 close games. Like, I think they're 0-14 or 0-13. Jay Morrison looked up the stat for The Athletic, and the last close game that they won was in 2018 when they beat the Buccaneers by 3 in week 8, and that was a crazy game that the Bengals almost blew. So
yeah, they were up by 3 touchdowns or something, I think, in that game.
Yeah, so this goes back even before Taylor was hired. So it's a mental thing, man. And not all close games are made the same. Sometimes it's fluky, like last week when they had a backdoor cover and they weren't really close throughout the game. And sometimes it's like the Chargers when it's just a defensive battle and the offense just doesn't muster up enough points when it needs to. But this, for how bad the Eagles are right now, there's no excuse for Joe Burrow and the Bengals offense to not put up enough points to win this game. The defense could struggle again. They could make Wentz look a little bit better than what he has been doing. But this is a game that if the Bengals don't win, like something drastically probably needs to go wrong for that defense. And it's possible for how they looked in week 2, but like this is a game that they should theoretically, like, if not win, keep it tightly contested throughout the game.
Yeah, if the trends of the last 2 weeks continue for both teams, you would think that it is a game that the Bengals could win, even though it's a road game. So with that being said, John, let's call our shot. Let's give a game prediction, and then we'll get on out of here in just a minute. But you got a shot to call here.
You know what? I'll say DJ Reader gets his first sack for the Bengals. I'll say, and you know what? The last time the Bengals won in week 3 was actually 2015. It was 5 years ago. They haven't won in week 3 in 5 years. It was 2015 on the road against the Ravens. You have to remember that AJ Green had 2 touchdowns that game, including the go-ahead winner. That has been every single highlight tape for AJ Green. I think this is a huge week for him. It is the week, I think, that we can determine if it's truly him being as washed as we think he is, or if it was just the rust that was showing up in the first 2 weeks and 5 days. Like, he has a great matchup against Nicole Roby-Coleman and Darius Slay. Their outside cornerbacks. Their secondary is just not good. It's easily exploitable. I think Green goes for at least 80, maybe even 100 yards this game. He connects with Burrow for the first time down the field. He has a really good game, and I think that's why the Bengals can probably win this game.
That week 3 game in 2015, was that the infamous Ravens game when AJ just went absolutely ham on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that game was awesome. I was in a plane for some of that game, unfortunately, but did get to watch some of that. That was an entertaining game. I'm going to say this is a big game for Carlos Dunlap. I think you're going to see him, whether or not Daniels and or Atkins play. I think it's very uncharacteristic of Dunlap to be this quiet 2 games in a row. I think you're going to see one of those patented tip balls that end up becoming a turnover, whether it's by his own grabbing of the interception, which we've seen before, or tipping it to another defender. I think you're going to see him get in the backfield, and I think you're going to see him, make some plays this week. And I think you're going to say, there's Carlos, there's 96, we missed you, buddy. And that is my shot. And I think that is going to lead to a Bengals victory. I called a Bengals loss last week, by the way. I didn't have the Bengals going 3-0, by the way, but I think the Bengals do win this week based on all of the things that we've talked about, John. I'm going to say 27-23 Cincinnati.
I think the over is right now like 46. I think it's a safe over for that, despite the Eagles' offense looking like absolute trash. I think they bounce back a little bit on offense. I think that they can get some big plays against the Bengals defense. I think Miles Sanders has a decent game. And again, that offensive line can still create damage against the Bengals defensive line. But like, this is the game where if Burrow, as long as he keeps this, if he keeps it going like he has in weeks 1 and 2, he should be able to continue to make good decisions, continue to move the ball down the field, and have no problem scoring like 25, 30 points against this Eagles defense. So the Bengals definitely cover that 5.5, I think, currently spread. I'll be honest. I gave the Eagles guys an Eagles win in my prediction on the show because I wanted to just appease them. They were going through it. Like they were down in the dumps. They were just not looking good. So I gave them an Eagles win there, but I'll give the Bengals a 31-28 win here.
Okay. So we called shots there, both on individual performances and score predictions. Love to hear yours in the live chat. Or if you're listening to us after the fact, go ahead and get in touch with us, whether it's through Facebook or the Cincy Jungle Facebook, the YouTube channel, or on Twitter. Get in touch with us. And by the way, download this program on your favorite audio platform. We're available on all of the major ones, so no excuses. Subscribe, get the program, get all of the great podcasts on the Cincy Jungle channel. We are just one of a couple that are on there, so check it out. John, let's drop the mic and get on out of here. What do you got for us before we hop out?
I don't really have much, but to the city of Louisville and everyone else who's hurting out there, we're thinking about you. We're with you. Yeah,
stinks that this year's been tough, man, on a lot of different fronts. Been a tough year. And obviously the Brianna, I unfortunately have been pretty busy today, so I haven't gotten to see a lot of the information there, but have heard rumblings there. So glad you brought that up. My mic drop this last week, I've noticed that Bengals fans have, as they begin to lose, they get a little their unrest ends up being projecting onto people. And I've noticed that our show and me a little bit have been in the scope of the fan ire, for better or for worse. I'm seeing some comments tonight saying why you guys even talking about this? It doesn't matter. The Bengals won't be successful. There was a comment on Cincy Jungle when we talked about and promoted our podcast there, talking about my inabilities as a host of the program. So, it is what it is, but I choose to focus on the positive. And I see guys like Antoine Malone saying, hey, we still need to get together sometime for a drink. He lives in Southern California. Even though he doesn't drink. So there's guys like that make us continue to want to do this. There's a guy like Steve Zorns on Twitter, John. I don't know if you saw this, but I was on a different podcast earlier this week, and he kind of said, I didn't get to watch that one last night, but I caught it today. I watched Anthony and John on Cincy Jungle every week. His name's Steve Zorns. And it's stuff like that to me. Unfortunately, you get the kind of the negative naysayers and whatnot, and I get that it's easy to be that way with the Cincinnati Bengals. But there are a lot of listeners, by the way. There are a lot of you out there that every once in a while we get that reminder of, hey, don't get down about things. And we've got some good people that like what we do, John. And as I always say, and I really mean it, I'm flattered that people care what I think, what we think, and tune into this show.
Yeah, if people are calling out and they're frustrated and they're saying that you guys suck, it means we're doing a good job. And because most of you appreciate the work that we do, and we love what we do, and we're not always going to please everybody, and that's just the nature of it. If we please everybody, we're not doing our job right. So to those who have stuck with us and can take our stuff every single week, thank you. And for those who quit out and decided they couldn't take it anymore, I'm sorry it wasn't for you, but this is just the way it is, and we're not going to change. Yep.
Well said. And I appreciate you and all of your vast contributions to this show, John. You are a valuable asset to this program and to CincyJungle.com. Appreciate you. We'll see you. I guess we'll see you Sunday for the pregame show presented by Narragansett Beer. You, me, Matt Minnick, and got some special guest giveaways and all that stuff. So if you have not had the chance to check out our pre-kickoff pregame show, hour before kickoff, check it out. We have some fun, a little more relaxed, and we get set for the game. So it's been fun so far, and check it out. You may win something, talk about the game, talk with other Bengals fans. It's a good time. We'll see you then. Keep it to CincyJungle.com for all your news, opinions, analysis. We'll see you.